Okay, so in this tutorial, we're going to learn how to set up live location and live location tracking within our Bubble app. Now, keep in mind that this is actually the fourth tutorial in a multi-part bubble mapping tutorial series. So if you haven't already watched the other tutorials, I've linked to them all below. Okay, so in the last tutorial, I taught you how to set the initial value of the map on page load. Now what we're going to do instead is we're going to set the initial value to the current user's location. Now this is very common logic in many different types of apps. So for example, things like transportation apps, logistics, or even social apps where you need to see your own location in real time in relation to the location of other elements on the map. Now those other elements could be places, or they could even be things like other app users. Either way, what we're going to dedicate ourselves to in this tutorial is mapping our current location as the logged in user on this map. Okay, so let's jump in. Now remember, in this tutorial series, we're using Nebulum's Mapbox Maps plugin. Now, if you don't already have this plugin installed, you can install it by going over here to plugins and then searching for Nebulum Mapbox, and it will show up right here. Now, once the map is installed and you've gone through the steps in the previous tutorials, you'll now be able to set this map up to track the current user's live location. Now, depending on your use case, there are a couple of different approaches to tracking a user's live location here. So notice within our plugins property panel, you'll see that we have these two different live location tracking systems. So a short description of each tracking system shows up here within the plugin, and you'll likely want to pick either one or the other so that you don't experience any conflicts or strange behavior. Now, one system isn't really better than the other. It really just boils down to what you're trying to do. So in a nutshell, this live tracking system 1, which you see right here, comes with a few more visual bells and whistles. Now notice that I can show my user's heading here. The live tracking dot is also pulsating, and there's even this GPS accuracy circle around my current location. However, in order to trigger this live tracking effect, the user will need to click on this little icon right here, which says find my location. Now, as the admin, you can toggle this icon on and off in your backend by clicking on show geolocate control right here. So it's important to have this enabled if you're using live tracking system 1. Also within this plugin, you can control the color of the pulsating dot by setting your live tracking color here. So some other things to consider here as well. First, when using this tracking system, it's common to use this specific system when you want live tracking to be user enabled. Now by default, the user must click on this button here to give your Bubble app tracking permission. However, there's also a workaround to manual initiation. You could simply use a workflow instead. So for example, here I could create a new workflow that says on page load, and then I could do a search for trigger geolocate. From here, I can just select my maps element, and now on page load, I will have successfully triggered that workflow. The first time this is initiated, keep in mind that the user will need to grant their browser permission to enable live tracking, and that can be all controlled through this little pop-up right here. Another thing to keep in mind is that live tracking system 1 is a little bit slower than live tracking system 2. So let's look at this alternative tracking system now. Okay, so live tracking system 2 works a little differently. So first, to enable live tracking system 2, let's first deactivate all settings in live tracking system 1. We'll also deactivate this icon here so that users cannot force trigger system 1. Okay, so now with this set up, we can enable tracking system 2. Now we can also set this checkbox here to follow the user if their location moves, and we can also set the tracking dot color right here. Now, the main difference with the second live tracking system is that it will activate live tracking on page load automatically. The users do not need to click on this icon like they did before, and we don't need to trigger any workflows. Tracking just starts automatically as long as the user has granted tracking permission to the browser. Again, with this tracking system, the first time the app loads, a pop-up will ask them for permission to track their location. And then after that, the browser will remember the user selection. And the user can obviously always just click on this little icon here and then toggle these permissions on or off later if they wanted to. Another consideration is that even though the second live tracking system has fewer visual bells and whistles, it also is quite a bit faster. So if speed is a priority for you, this might be the better of the two options. Okay, so now that we know the difference between System 1 and System 2 live tracking, how can we set the user's location to be the default map location? Well, the easiest way would be to simply use System 2 live tracking. With System 2 enabled and System 1 disabled, we could simply go into our map settings and then set the initial lat and long values to current geographic position latitude and current geographic position longitude. Now notice when we jump back into our front end and we reload the page loads and we'll zoom into our current location. Okay, so hopefully now you understand how to integrate live user tracking into your Bubble application. Now this is an enormously powerful feature that unlocks a whole category of real-time tracking opportunities. So for example, think delivery platforms showing customers exactly where their driver is, ride-sharing apps tracking a vehicle's approach, or fleet management dashboards monitoring multiple field technicians. And beyond logistics, live tracking opens doors to social experiences like group hiking apps, festival friend-finding tools, and live race or event participation maps. Essentially, any situation where knowing where something or someone is right now rather than where they were creates value for your end users. Now, with the 2 tracking systems this plugin provides, you have the flexibility to build all of these use cases and more. So I hope you found this valuable, and remember, a link to this plugin can be found below. Or again, remember you can find it within your app by just clicking on this plugins tab and then searching for Nebulum Mapbox, and it will show up right here. So that's all I have for you. Thanks for stopping by today.